A lot is being revealed these days to the discerning eye of the Christian. And Revealed just happens to be the title of a book we're going to be talking about today. It's written by William Koenig. Bill Koenig, welcome to Prophecy Watch.
Thank you, Gary.
We have discussed your book at some length. Today I'd like to go a little bit deeper than we have done before. The title, Revealed, subtitle, Obama's Legacy, takes a look at our government, where it's going, and the picture is not pretty. It's, in one way, distressing, a little disheartening. In another way, as you and I have already discussed, we're looking here at the will of God, who is allowing certain things to happen for His glory in these latter days. And both of us believe that we're in the latter days, right?
No doubt about it, Gary. All the signs are there. Jerusalem is God's time clock. We're watching the nations of the world obsessed with the state of Israel and the division of Jerusalem, and we're rapidly moving through the final days.
And again, I have to emphasize, as a student of Bible prophecy, nothing happens that God does not know about in advance, does not allow to happen.
Exactly.
His permissive will allows things to happen that a lot of times we would disagree with. We'd say, why are you letting this happen, Lord? You're letting this beautiful country fall under the leadership of people who are not necessarily godly people. A lot of evil and wicked things happening in government these days. But I think your book, and again, the title of it is Revealed, a very, if you will, revealing title. The title of this book goes to the fact that if you take a proper look at what's happening, it's not so distressing as you may think. The Lord's hand is in all this.
That helps a tremendous amount. And sometimes when, I've seen these things take place, my 16 years working out of the White House with press credentials, Gary, has given me the opportunity to watch Bible prophecy playing out right before our eyes. President Bush's father, Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, birthing the two-state plan. And, where we are today with Obama, the decisions that Bush made in the Middle East, decisions that Obama made in the Middle East. These are accelerating final day events. And we're so blessed to understand fully God's Genesis to Revelation plan for the world that we live in, with His Son, Jesus Christ, eventual return to Jerusalem. And the spirit of prophecy is in Revelation 19:10 is Jesus. Jesus is the spirit of prophecy. So we are literally living in, I consider, the most exciting times in biblical history. And it helps when we know that.
It does, indeed. Now, you've made a statement that all presidents have a prophetic purpose. And you and I have had a conversation off camera where we went all the way back and talked about early presidents in America. And when you look at it this way, each president has been, if you will, put in place by the Lord for a particular purpose. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Absolutely. When you look at FDR, he signed a letter with the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, or actually it was the King of Saudi Arabia. At the time, FDR signed a letter saying if Israel ever wanted to become a state, that he would notify him immediately. 7 days later from signing that agreement, Harry Truman became President of the United States, who as president ensured that Israel became a state and became a great supporter of the state of Israel because of his Christian background.
Yes.
Dick Nixon, his mother was a Christian that believed that someday her son would have the opportunity to do something significant for the state of Israel. And by him doubling and tripling what Golda Meir needed during the Yom Kippur War, along with General Alexander Haig's help, they were able to make sure that Israel was successful in the Yom Kippur War. Ronald Reagan he had a great interest in Bible prophecy. And by bringing down the Iron Curtain, millions of Jews were able to leave the Soviet Union and communism to move back to the nation of Israel. in an aliyah. President George Herbert Walker Bush sponsored the final day peace process that started in Madrid in 1991. Not to forget Jimmy Carter's Camp David Agreement, but George Bush's final push for a final day Daniel 9:27 peace covenant began with Bush in October of 91. Then Bill Clinton was involved. President Bush accelerated final day events by the war in Iraq and Afghanistan, and also birthed the two-state plan. Barack Obama, as I go into great detail in the book about Israel and the Middle East being much more dangerous now because of what he did by moving out of Iraq too fast, by what he's done in Afghanistan, by calling ISIS a JV team, and also calling on Israel to divide their covenant land. And even worse, Gary, for Israel and the Middle East is the Iran nuke deal, because he was after a legacy, so to speak, with that deal. And we've seen since July 14, 2015 to now, that has been a bad deal, and it's only going to get worse.
Yeah, when the paper money, loaded aboard an airplane and flown to Iran in the dark of night, reached its destination, a deal was struck. A deal was sealed, actually, that in one respect is horrific, but in another respect, I thought at the time, this is a stage in the fulfillment of Latter-day Bible prophecy.
No doubt about it.
Because Ezekiel talks about a pact and a covenant between Persia and Russia.
Absolutely. When you look at Jeremiah 49, 35 through 39, that speaks of Elam, which is Iran.
Right.
And more than likely, Israel's going to be the one that eventually deals with that, deals with Iran prior to the Gog-Magog war of Ezekiel 38 and 39. But this Iran nuke deal is another accelerator of final day events. It's very significant. This was Obama and John Kerry's effort at legacy. So once again, this has furthered things quicker and more rapidly toward a final day conclusion.
So on the one hand, we as Christians were saying, "Oh, let's hold everything. We don't want these prophetic things to move into dark areas that we don't approve of."
Right.
But on the other hand, we may have to move there in order for prophecy to be fulfilled.
Yeah, exactly. In the context that God is allowing this all to happen, He allowed Obama to be elected the first time and the second time, and many Christians stayed at home that could have voted that didn't vote either time. They could have made a difference in that election, Gary, but nonetheless, God allowed that to happen. And in many ways, I think a lot of us have been surprised that there hasn't been other consequences to Obama in the last 7.5 years, because he's had pretty much a free reign of doing things that are a direct affront to our faith, our Christian faith.
Now, in his book, again, it's called Revealed, Obama's Legacy, Bill has stated to me several times, I used his words, I used Obama's words in this book.
Exactly.
To illustrate exactly what happens, one stage at a time. And by the way, you've done a really good job of making those points clear.
That is so important, Gary, because most of this is not in the media. 85 to 90% completely support him. And a lot of the conservative national media does not understand things through the biblical lens that we look at events as. And that was, number one, is connect the dots of all these things happen, revealed all these things that have happened that are an affront to the Scripture, and then give people an idea of what he said to the Turkish parliament, what he said to the Muslim world from Cairo in June of 2009, the bowing to the king of Saudi Arabia. What did he say to the mosque in February of 2016 in Baltimore, Maryland? And what did he say at the national prayer event when he chastised Christians and said, don't get on your high horse, and mentioned the Crusades and Christians' involvement in the South during the time of slavery? He is quick to chastise us. And then again, his great passion to see mostly Muslim refugees coming from the Middle East and Africa into the United States, and not saying anything about the horrible Christian persecution, the slaughter of believers throughout the Middle East. He shows no emotion about that. So these are things, Gary, as believers that we need to know about and to share with others, because I have people in my family and friends that had no idea that these things all had taken place in the last 7.5 years.
And to me, the fascinating thing is that when we watch, for example, the two-state solution being advocated, that's a violation of a long-standing covenant between God and Israel. He brought them back into the land, and there's the idea now that the rest of the world can sort of control what happens in Israel.
Well, that's huge, and it's been huge in my book, Eye to Eye, and it's been huge in this, Gary. And we know the Abrahamic covenant's an everlasting covenant.
Yeah.
That God gave that land to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and their descendants. That no earthly leader has the right to divide that land, or the city of Jerusalem. And I document what happens to those that attempt to divide the land. I mean, there's a Genesis 12:3 blessing or curse. And I think the best way to put it is, and I really believe the Lord put this in my heart, is He did not intend for the biblical heart of Israel, Judea and Samaria, and the eternal capital of Israel, Jerusalem, to be divided or to be established as a Palestinian Arab state. So in other words, Judea and Samaria and Jerusalem are not to be an Arab state. This is the biblical heartland of Israel, of land that God gave to the Jewish people.
Well, and what you're saying stimulates another thought, and that is that whenever Barack Obama stands up and refers to the Middle East, he uses the term ISIL, I-S-I-L, instead of ISIS, this group. And the L there would stand for the Levant, which geographically speaking is everything from the northeast corner of the Mediterranean Sea all the way down to the River of Egypt. In other words, he's referring to a large plot of land, meaning that this group that dresses itself in black and calls itself ISIS, by rights, should have access to all of that land, all the way down to the coast of the Mediterranean Sea.
Exactly, and the irony is actually that Levant land is actually covenant land. That's the land from the Euphrates River in Genesis 17, from the Euphrates River to the Wabi River in Egypt, that includes parts of Saudi Arabia and Iraq and Jordan and Lebanon, Israel, and part of Egypt. So isn't that interesting, that Levant area that he speaks of, as if it's the Islamic State of the Levant, is in reality the heartland of Israel.
It's almost code language. Everybody else says
that's
ISIS.
He's the only one, and some of his top people call it ISIL. Everybody else calls it ISIS or Islamic State.
And so he reveals himself.
Correct.
And that brings up the word reveal, the title of your book, Revealed, Obama's Legacy. You go to great lengths to document the things that he has revealed by his actions, by his statements, and you've got them all here in order, and you make the case. And from my perspective as a teacher of Bible prophecy, the case is prophecy is being rapidly fulfilled.
Without a doubt, Gary, and that's from the beginning of the book, I wanted people to understand how he was influenced and who he's influenced. Saul Alinsky, which we've heard about a lot, Franklin Marshall Davis, Reverend Jeremiah Wright, Valerie Jarrett, and some others that had a great influence on how Obama became who he is. And then his affinity for Islam in his June 4, 2009 speech, it's so obvious that he's so pro-Islam. And then his position on LGBT and the effect of getting rid of don't ask, don't tell in our military and stripping down our military and making it difficult for Christians to serve in the military. And then the LGBT agenda, which has made it difficult for Christians in the workplace, in corporate America, that are being forced to do sensitivity training, or in the school system, or Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, professional sports teams. This thing has spread so far and wide. And then reading his chapter on faith in his book, Audacity of Hope, and how he twists the scriptures, and it's a convoluted faith, and it's more of I'll take these scriptures for my use, but I'm not going to acknowledge or let those scriptures determine my behavior. And then at the end of the book, Gary, giving him the opportunity to put things in order biblically.
Now, at the time that all this is happening, there are a number of crucial things that are happening in the rest of the world.
Absolutely.
Military developments involving North Korea, involving China, high-tech developments worldwide. People are preparing for war. Well, let's just come out and say it.
It's a very serious time.
It's a very serious time we're living in, and you get the feeling that some people on our side don't really want us to win the war.
Well, unfortunately, our underbelly, our country is more divided than ever before over the last 7.5 years. We're becoming more sinful as a nation. The first scripture in my book is Isaiah 5:20, when good is considered evil.
Yeah.
And evil is considered good. And I listened to the White House correspondents speak about these events that they consider evil. Well, no, that's good. Or stuff that they consider good, that's evil. So it's distorted, it's out of order, Gary. We're in a period of deception and division and confusion, and the church is getting less and less meaningful, sadly. And, here we have 48% of the Protestants and 48% of the Catholics have voted for Obama in 2012. Only 20% of the evangelicals and a lot of Christians just stayed at home and didn't even elect. He didn't even elect him. But that's another reason for my book. I want people that have no idea what has happened in the last 7.5 years to find out what happened in his words and activities that happened based on his activity and people within his administration to get a better idea of what has taken place for the last 7.5 years that has created the problem that we all sense today that we're living with.
Well, and I want to take a little turn here because a lot of us have heard about climate change, for example. And as a Christian, I believe God created the heavens and the earth. I believe he created an environment suitable for man. I believe that he created man. Man did not evolve. And that he has a plan for man on this globe, and he's going to preserve it, protect it, keep the environment. There's a legion of political and scientific people out there now that are saying, no, God's not in control. There's global warming. You have to trust us to take the proper steps to keep this globe from overheating and destroying mankind. It's the scientific community. It's not God anymore. And so our president has really gotten aboard the climate change bandwagon and ridiculing Christians who say, no, we don't have to worry about climate change. That's in the hands of the Lord. And suddenly we find ourselves the object of ridicule.
We are becoming the problem.
We are.
We are the problem when it comes to these moral issues. I mean, we live in the Washington, D.C. area, and our school board was being forced, our Fairfax County School Board was being forced by the Department of Education to include transgenderism in education. And people from our church and many churches from around our county went in and told the school board, this is an affront, this is against the scripture, your LGBT agenda, went on and on. I mean, this was a overpowering amount of Christians that came to that school board to speak and had no influence. The vote was 10-1.
Wow.
And we're hearing that all across the country.
Yes, we are.
Where we that stand for what the scriptures say when it comes to the LGBT, when it comes to education of the young people in the schools, when it comes to allowing gays to operate as scout leaders in the Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts, it doesn't matter what we say. And who would have ever thought? And they take great pride when they defeat us in these school board events or when they defeat us in elections. And Gary, this is for the heart and soul of America. And we know what we're supposed to do. And it's a battle of who would have ever thought we'd have this battle in our lifetime?
We are now the enemy. And
we are.
We believe in creation rather than evolution.
Yes.
We believe that God controls this planet and not a bunch of bureaucrats.
Yes.
And this makes us the enemy. And
absolutely.
You go to great length to document a number of executive branch statements that support that idea.
Oh yes, I go into great detail. His every June was LGBT Pride Month. The Clintons started Gay Pride Month when they were at the White House. And then George Bush never honored Gay Pride Month on the June. But when Obama took office, they decided that every June would be LGBT Pride Month. So I've taken some of his speeches and have them in the book, and also the fact that he said he'd done more than the previous 43 presidents included to do what he did for that agenda, which led to same-sex marriage.
We've talked a little bit about Bible prophecy, and I have my Bible open here to 2 Timothy chapter 3. And there's a whole list under the chapter 3 heading, "This know also that in the last days perilous times shall come." And Paul has a list of many, many, many items that would be featured in these perilous times. And among them, in verse 5, it says that the people alive at that time would have a form of godliness, but denying the power thereof.
Perfect scripture.
And this came into my mind as you were talking a minute ago. There are those that have a form of godliness, and in our executive branch, the president and his staff have a form of godliness.
Exactly, and what's interesting to me that God has, to a certain degree, been quiet and let these things evolve the last 7.5 years. I was surprised that there weren't other things that happened in that 7.5 years that could have been dramatic, like 9/11 or some other major domestic issues. But God, it just seemed like he just allowed this, Gary, to play out for his purpose. And I think the more they got away with this, the more they have been empowered, and the more they feel this type of godliness, and the more that they feel that they can do whatever they want to and not have a consequence or not have repercussions. That's what surprised me, Gary, but I know that God has a plan in allowing it to play out the way he has. And that's another reason I wrote Revealed, to show people what is happening is what is building.
You talk about a systematic destabilization of our traditional governmental bureaus and the military, as though this is part of a large plan.
Yeah, when you look at it, it looks very diabolic. You sit back, and I think watching it happen is not a surprise, because we've always had an element, secular, humanist, progressives that have wanted to move in this direction where they're calling the shots.
Sure.
Not to be accountable to a God or even acknowledging a God. They didn't want to go there. And God has allowed them, knowing that God's on the throne and he's sovereign, he's allowed this to happen. And what's going to be exciting, Gary, is to see what the Lord does with this. We're living in serious and ominous and difficult
We are.
and oppressive times for some people. But for us as believers, we know God has a plan in this, and only he knows how it's going to play out. I don't listen to people that predict the times. We have the scriptures that speak of the times, but how it's going to actually play out is going to be very, very interesting going forward.
And that involves Bible prophecy.
Absolutely.
Leading up to a diabolical global system of control. And we've all read about that. The book of Revelation, the book of Daniel is absolutely packed with details about how that's going to come about. I suppose the big question in the minds of Christians these days is, why is God doing this? Is he letting us down when all of these diabolical powers come into action? The answer is certainly not.
No, right. And a lot of times, Gary, when we have a time like this, many, many will come to faith in Jesus Christ. That's probably the best of anything. God is allowing this to happen. He's given us the scriptures to show us how it's going to play out. Yep. He gave us the signs.
Yep.
And we're watching it firsthand. All final day markers are in play like never before.
That's true.
And many, many people are going to come to Jesus Christ. Their faith in Jesus that will come through these difficult and more challenging times. That's the encouraging news.
It is encouraging. The God of prophecy is not going to let us down. A lot of you, most of you probably, are familiar with Bill's work called Eye to Eye, in which he talks about the consequences, basically, of going against the will of God, the consequences for men and for nations. And you document a number of events that came to pass at the time that people were doing some things that were not right at all.
Yeah, we've had over 90. In my book, Eye to Eye, I have all through the Bush, most of Bush's terms. I mean, Bush, Clinton, Bush. And then the DVD, I also include Obama time in office, the consequences when he attempted to divide the land of Israel in his administration. So we've had over $90 billion record-setting catastrophes that have happened since October 91, when the perfect storm was sending 30-foot waves into President Bush's home, up until the present. So we've had over 90 record-setting events that have taken place usually the same day or within 24 hours of us pressuring Israel to divide their covenant land. It's amazing, and it happens anytime there's a major catastrophe. Watch what we've been doing in the state of Israel.
There are consequences.
There are.
For violating the will of God.
And God's covenant.
And Bill is a master chronicler in Eye to Eye, the book and the DVD. His latest book, Revealed, Obama's Legacy. And when he says revealed, he means it. You go into areas that we really have not talked about at length here. Some of them, I think, are probably not suitable for presentation on a program like this. Some of them will amaze you, but let's put it this way. There has been a program and a plan in action that you need to know about it, and it is revealed in this book, Revealed, Obama's Legacy. Yours for $14.95 in our online bookstore, prophecywatchers.com. Dial down to the online bookstore, and you'll find a section devoted to Bill Koenig's books. This one, called Revealed, the preceding book, Eye to Eye, and the DVD counterpart. By the way, all three yours available in what we're calling a Presidents in Prophecy package for $44.95. I think you'll be amazed, if you haven't thought about these things, at just what's happening behind the scenes. Again, you are a credentialed White House journalist.
Almost 16 years. I came right after President Bush took office, and have had an amazing experience. As I shared, Gary, I went to the Middle East with President Bush in 2008, Israel and the Middle East. It was a great experience. And I've had the opportunity to spend a lot of time in Israel, many trips. And we're just so blessed to be watching.
You've blessed us with the information that you give us.
Well, thank you.
And keep on keeping on. Just
we'll do it, Gary. Thank you.
Keep those wonderful observations in print so that we can really find out what's going on the inside of things.
Thank you. Always great to be with you.
It's great to have you. Bill
Thank
Koenig, I hope you enjoyed visiting with him today, as I did. I'm Gary Stearman. Hey, keep watching. We are. Thanks for joining us on Prophecy Watchers. You can find us on the web at prophecywatchers.com, where you can sign up for our free email newsletter. In the meantime, keep watching, everybody, and we'll see you soon.